I mean, I can, because I don't know enough about Sri Lanka and India and that relationship, I could sort of suspend my suspicion, right, and sort of say, well, you know, he knows more about it and he's on the ground and he's got some idea. But any kind of suggestion that this is a model for us in terms of a relationship with the United States and somewhere else.
No, I'm not saying that.
Because
I'm not
there's
saying you anything about your country. All I'm saying is that even after you went through that whole agonizing experience, I don't see anybody in Canada now trying to roll back then after.
Well, I think you're...
Are you rolling back? Is anybody taking active steps to roll it back?
There's all kinds of people who are very alarmed about the
No, you can be alarmed, but I'm asking about active measures to roll it back.
There's an elite consensus on it, that's why.
So we go back to this thesis.
Which is
That, you know, elections are never fought on the real issues. Elections are fought on strange issues. So you should, you know, do something about the democratic system. I don't know. I mean, I work with this sort of malfunctioning, dysfunctional democratic system, what we've got. I don't even consider Sri Lanka democracy. I don't consider Canada democracy. But that's what we've got. Better than people sitting upon Burnaby Hill and thinking that they know all the answers.
Rohan, can we go mentally back to your slide where you talked about the no rules situation? And it had two axioms in it. One was the creation of agreements among unequal parties. That is your the 5 lunch boxes taken on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday sequence, and the bully gets lunch each week. Then the second axiom was about reaching agreements between equal parties.
Yeah.
What do equal parties look like, and how do you get there?
Part of the thesis here, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff in the paper that I skipped over. Part of it is that basically bilateral agreements are power-oriented, because you can't theoretically have 2 equal parties. There will always be inequalities. So the thesis then goes that you go plurilateral. Small number of parties is better than bilateral, and that multilateral is actually superior to both. Because at that point, the power orientation can be neutralized greatly by the fact of, you know, things like the most favored nation, non-discrimination principles, etc. You do it with one, it's automatically extended to everybody else. So in addition to the normal arguments that come from economic theory, which is about transaction costs being minimized, what this does is that it not only talks about transaction costs, but it also talks about the multilateral negotiating setting is less power laden and neutralizes the power of the larger entities. You can see that almost in Europe, in European Union negotiations, where the small countries will gang up on France and Germany and will, I mean, you can see that happening all the time. It happens in the SAARC countries, not that we take any decisions ever, but it happens. I mean, I've been in meetings where, you know, I sort of wink and at the Nepalese and the Maldivians and Bangladeshis, and we sort of gang up on India whenever we feel like it. So, you know, there is that element of the negotiating process that Jackson talks about as well. So, of course, you don't get, I mean, very clearly, one of the ugliest things that I have discovered, which I think Dallas would have great sympathy with, and in particular Bill Melody, is how totally unprepared these countries are for negotiations. The failure of the bureaucracies, the failure of the states is so incredible, particularly in terms of how they go into negotiations. They don't know what the hell they're doing. That is a serious problem. That is where I say that really that third condition of sort of knowledgeable, power, equal parties doesn't exist, because these people, Indians sort of, they're okay. But even they have serious weaknesses in their negotiating capacity. You can see there's one classic example. The early part of the Indian negotiation on the GATS was based almost entirely on a Mode 4 drive. That is, they said, we have done body shopping and we have sent these IT engineers into the United States. They have been taxed, they have been subject to visa formalities, etc., etc. We are training these enormous numbers of nurses that we are going to ship out into these countries. we are going to beat the Westerners over the head and the Japanese over the head on mode 4 disciplines. That was their primary, I mean, not that they told us, you could see it from the texts that they were generating. They were going to get freedom for service suppliers to move from country to country. For some reason, which I am still trying to find out, when it came to making the actual offers, the Indians sort of split. They moved in great disarray. They dropped mode 4. And now the Indians are sort of flailing around without that. I mean, they've changed strategies midstream. They were going for mode 4, and you could say they were going for mode 4 for either to actually get access for the nurses, the healthcare workers, the geriatric services people, and the IT people that they were training. I mean, this was very detailed, like saying, you will not take social security payments from these people. That level of detail they had gone into. You will not take social security payments because since they go back, they will not benefit from social security. That is a barrier to trade. They went to that level. And then you could say they were either trying to open the market for these people, or they were going to use it to beat them on something else and get concessions on something else. But suddenly at the offer stage, the Indians flip, which suggests that either they're incompetent or whatever. So they now are flailing around without a strategy. Seem to be just driving on agriculture or something like that. I mean, at least that mode 4 strategy on the services side is gone, which suggests incompetence.
I distinctly remember Dallas saying when you were a student, probably around 1980 or 81, that in his view, he should be traveling, or Melody should be traveling to countries where such training for negotiations was needed, or that the school, the department, should be functioning in part as a place where people came to learn these things.
But then you get into this whole question of, do people really want in this dysfunctional government structures, do people really want to negotiate well? That's where your nation state collapses. I mean, the nation state sort of wants to do things. Some of these guys don't want to do it. I mean, otherwise, how do I get into these things? I'm not even in the government, and I'm doing all the work.
Yeah.
It's interesting to understand Indian-style democracy and how it's such a very different culture, and in India being a colony, and then the Indian India being created, its modern conception being created from a colony. So who's working in the government and where they come from, the cultural, what culture they bring to the institution. Government is very different from the culture of people born and raised here and become leaders here. So I can see how that gets reflected in center versus periphery nations in the way that their democracies run.
I'm not sure that I agree with you. I mean, when I talk about Indian negotiators, I pick them because generally in the international relations field, people have considered the Indians to be the best of the negotiators. From the time of Krishnamon, the best players in the UN, the guys who give you most hell about drafting documents, resolutions. Everybody has seen them as the stars of the third world. They're the best at that game. And I've negotiated with these guys, and I know how good they are. And that's the civil service. It's not the political bodies. It's the people who come through the British administrative service, the colonial whatever administrative service, which is transformed into the Indian administrative service. They're good. But what I'm saying is that even they, I just gave one example of even they not really having a strategy or of not holding on to the strategy. And I could see, I even tested them on this. Because all I did was, in their early stages, they had put what I call requests. They had put a request to Sri Lanka on mode 4, which is they wanted Sri Lanka to open up on mode 4 completely. So all I did is I took the exact language that they had used on Sri Lanka and I put it as the Sri Lankan position without telling them what it was. They said, oh my God, we can't do that. I said, what do you mean? This is from your request. Why can't we do that? So essentially in the second phase of the negotiation, I nailed it. by using the first phase of their negotiation. And then they said, at least they wouldn't back. I wouldn't back away from it. They said, at least take that little thing at the bottom where I had said from, just to I had said from the Indian request to Sri Lanka dated such and such. They said, at least take that out, Rohan, please. So I took that out.
Good. Time for one more question. Bill? Pat? I don't know.
Pat,
Someone had their-
Yeah, okay. I just want to point out that, maybe you're not aware of this, but the issue of trade and services is very hot in Canada and is being discussed. And one of the hottest areas is health services. And one of the things that seems to be going on is that there's some illusion on the part of the Canadian negotiators that there's this great opportunity for us to sell services in the health sector. And we've got to open that up for us, and not paying an adequate attention to the question of what it means to do it in reverse. And there's this tremendous interest in the Canadian market. And, I don't know what the situation is in terms of India and Sri Lanka and how they compare in terms of health services, but it's quite clear there's a huge difference in terms of the US and Canada in terms of their models on the provision of this service. So it isn't the case that people don't pay any attention to it or don't have any opinions about it.
If you actually read your spam, you will find that health services are being traded across borders quite extensively.
I'm
The
very
thing is,
aware of
people
it.
don't read their spam. So in the same way that in the early stages of broadcasting, health services were supplied against US national rules from Mexico. A lot of the so-called quacks, the people who didn't fall within the definition of orthodoxy, moved across to Mexico and blasted their programming in and supplied their services using God knows what. I don't know what means they used, postal orders
Rohan,
or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that is going on the internet all the time now.
Rohan, what I was inclined to, what Pat's question.
I know, she's saying that the Canadian
No,
health
Pat-
system will collapse.
No, but
I think it will.
I think what Pat's question is raising, is opening up, that the category of services is a mysterious fiction, because in services are combined health, which of course moves by germs, let's say, for the moment. It includes banking services, all right?
Education.
So,
Not just hair.
I know this, that's why I said
Wait,
services
wait.
is the future.
wait.
Services
And
is
so
not
you-
separate
and so
from
you-
goods,
and
is
so you-
the future.
These
Economy.
are not just economic categories we're talking about here. There's a whole question of an industrial development strategy versus a whole question about meeting basic social needs. And these things are intentional.
Yeah,
And there are people who are fighting to
it's
hold on to that.
good
original
that you
vision.
fight, but you better pay attention to what's going on the internet. Because these things are not going to be decided in meeting rooms.
But then
The
what is-
future
what
of
is-
these things are not decided on the
So
meeting
your
rooms.
argument is that it's technologically driven?
No,
That it's
there is a-
determined?
I'm not saying technological driven. I'm saying people are finding all kinds of means to do whatever the hell they want, and the nation states will not be able to control it. That is part of the attrition. It's sort of like your little concrete pieces falling off this building. Your nation state is falling apart. That is part of what I'm talking about. Is that it will be eroded. If you can try to control that, good luck to you. That's much better than going and negotiating about help.
But that's because you didn't start by considering the state as a scene of class struggle.
Well, I'm not into this class stuff anymore.
Okay, right. I think that should be said, so that.
Of course!
So-
I'm very proud to say that. I do live in the present.
Okay, well, then,
That's all
then,
Pat.
then there's a increasing gap. I mean, you're a neoliberal in the
Yes,
morning
yes.
and a well-wisher in the
Yes.
afternoon, in a certain sense.
Yeah. I think, I think all those theories explain everything and nothing. They have been explaining everything. If the Canadians are agreeing to X, it is because of class. If they don't agree to Y, it is also because of class. I'm sorry, I never accepted it even those days when I was at Simon Fraser. That particular class analysis. It never appears in any of my writings.
Okay.
Rohan, thank you very much. We have waited a long time, many years, for you to come and give this lecture. It's been very much worth the wait. And we know that you're here tomorrow. If any of you are able to come in the morning, right here in this building, there'll be a discussion on Sri Lanka. Just as he said, whether it's on the road towards Singapore or Somalia. And I think we'll get into probably a much more detailed analysis of the political situation in Sri Lanka, which Rohan knows intimately. In some ways, one might say that had Rohan not come here, when I speculate, of course, that had he not come here in 1979 or 80 and started the journey that he's on, we would be somewhat different, of course. He would have stayed in Sri Lanka, and he could be very well a body lying on the side of the road. I do believe that his life would have not necessarily been quite this long had he remained in Sri Lanka. Am I off the target?
No, you're right.
So I sense that...
I will thank my existence to this.
I do think so. So, thank you very much.